Hi, my name is James Yoder, and I'm coming to you on behalf of the Anabaptist Disciples of Christ Planning Committee. I reside in Napanee, Indiana, and am one of the pastors of Berea Christian Fellowship, which is also an affiliate congregation of ADC. Greetings, fellow pastors and congregants. We trust that these episodes are an encouragement and an inspiration as we chart these unprecedented times. Who would have thought that a microscopic genome, an organism so small that is completely unseen by the human eye, could create such a global crisis? Or one could ask, are there other factors at stake? Well, we don't know that for certain, and we don't know the full story. But if there's a lesson to be learned, it would remind us how fragile we are, how fragile the kingdom of this world is, and the fragility of our economic and our social and our political system is compared to God's kingdom. I think Paul's words to the Corinthian church frames it well when he said, "But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us." That's found in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7. And the term jars of clay puts some perspective to the human plight. But as believers, notice how this perspective changes. The following two verses puts a refreshing spin to it. Listen to what it says. It says, "We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven in despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies." Hey, listen, we don't have to play the victim in hard times. In fact, hard times can be a doorway to new opportunities. Times of adversity offers opportunities that we typically don't see when we get stuck in a rut. I believe it was Winston Churchill that once said, "A pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity, and an optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty." Look, changes are going to happen. It's inevitable. Typically, we can adjust when adequate time and thought has been invested. But what about the times when we're forced to adjust without warnings? This obviously creates a tension point for any leader. Today, as a pastor who's in the saddle with you, I'd like to think of 3 best practices that can be implemented when we are required to adjust at a moment's notice. The first best practice I'd suggest is to normalize the chaos. I learned this technique years ago from a trusted mentor friend who was about 25 years my senior. And I observed that when he was given charge of a chaotic circumstance, he would attempt to normalize the situation to the best of his ability. He would give assent that things have changed and that the routine has been disrupted. But he would quickly stabilize the chaos by establishing a new routine to minimize the angst that was in the hearts of the people. One of the key factors for leaders is to quickly establish a new norm. It will bring a sense of comfort and rest to the situation. Another good way to normalize the chaos is to help your people think through the big picture. When disaster strikes, there are many voices. There are as many voices as there are people. Shut down the noise by helping your people think through all the different voices. Many people want to hear their pastors because they trust them and they want to hear their perspective. This is a window of opportunity for you to engage them. A good example of this comes from the renowned Martin Luther, who was writing to his friend and fellow pastor, Dr. John Hess, how the Christians ought to deal with the bubonic plague that was hitting their hometown in 1527. He wrote, and I quote, "I shall ask God to mercifully protect us. Then I shall fumigate, help purify the air, administer medicine, and take it myself. I shall avoid places and persons where my presence is not needed in order not to become contaminated and thus perchance inflict and pollute others and so cause their death as a result of my negligence. If God should want to take me, he will surely find me, and I have done what is expected of me, and so I am not responsible for either my own death or the death of others. If my neighbor needs me, however, I shall not avoid place or person, but will go freely as stated above." See, this is such a God-fearing faith because it is neither brash nor foolhardy, nor does it tempt God. End of quote. Now, while Brother Luther and I have tangled on numerous theological fronts in the past, I believe he gave some very solid advice. We take care of ourselves, but not to the exclusion of caring for others. See, this is the kind of message that your people need to hear from you, particularly when things are in a turmoil. We look for ways to normalize the chaos. A second best practice is to simplify the complexity. As pastors, you well know that the test of leadership does not occur when everything is smooth sailing, but rather we are tested in times of crises. We are currently facing a complex time, but the best way to solve complexity is with simplicity. Our leadership team met soon after the stay-home mandate went into effect to process and formulate a plan how we're going to be doing church in the months or the weeks to follow. One of the questions that surface, or one of the ideas that surface, is whether now was a good opportunity to implement small groups or cell groups as we know them. Now, this was not a new idea to anyone on the team because, in fact, it had been on our agenda for the last several years. But we had intentionally put this matter aside due to reevaluating our mission, vision, and values statement as a congregation. And the hope was that cell groups would emerge out of our mission, vision, and values rather than constructing around it. However, we concluded that now is not the time to restructure. It's too big of an undertaking and too complex to implement when things are already chaotic. A restructure of this sort requires careful processing, and it's the kind of thing that ought to be done intentionally rather than by default. And so I would submit to you to keep everything as simple as you possibly can when faced with disruptions. That's the second best practice. The third and final best practice that I would propose is that we pursue new opportunities. Yes, look for new opportunities in the midst of the bedlam. I know that many of us are simply trying to keep the basic fundamentals rolling forward. But I'd like to remind you that some very dynamic ministries have developed by being pushed out of our comfort zone. I know my tendency, when the routine is disrupted, is just to sort of hunker down and wait till the storm passes. But how often have I missed opportunities because I have not gone looking for them? I've got to tell you, I've been impressed to hear about some of the stories of creative adjustments that people and congregations have made in the recent weeks. They are truly inspiring. A week or two ago, I was in conversation with one of the single sisters from our congregation, and she asked me a probing question. She said, "James, are we thinking about the opportunities that this crisis is bringing to us?" Wow, the question stopped me dead in my tracks. Now, allow me to put some perspective to her question. This young girl is not your typical run-of-the-mill millennial. Several years ago, she spent a year serving on a medical team on the front lines in Syria. This was an active war zone among the Syrians. Bombs and artillery were falling around her and around them and her team on any given day. She literally laid her life on the line to give medical care to victims who had fallen prey to the war. She returned home a bit earlier than she had intended because of emotional and physical fatigue. But what makes this story even more compelling is that after taking some time off to heal and to recuperate, she decided to go back to nursing school to get her RN degree in order for her to become better equipped to be used of God to offer her services. So the question she posed to me did not come from a young, cocky idealist who had a lot of answers in life, but from someone who had literally served on the front lines and had risked her own life to help others. I believe she has a voice that deserves a hearing. So I simply ask you the question, have you thought about new opportunities that this pandemic is bringing to us? Or are you just waiting till the storm passes? I pray that God will lead you and your congregations in ways that will expand the kingdom of God. Hey, look, the last chapter is written. The winner has already been determined because it says, in all things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. So fight well, my brothers, and may we be found faithful. God bless you.